Hi, friends, and welcome to Talking with Famous People. Meow, 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 talking with famous people. I'm your host Eric, and I'm here today to talk to you about my interesting sessions this morning. And in particular, a couple of things I really like about ISFPs and ISFJs in general. Now, there's one person that always comes to mind when I think about ISFJs in particular, but also when I think about people who disagreed with my typing of them. Note that this is a fairly rare phenomenon. It's fairly rare that I get somebody who disagrees and continues to disagree over time with my typing of them. I'd say by and large, I have many more NI types come to me than NE types. So this morning I had the great pleasure of typing an ISFJ, which I almost never get to type. And then I followed that up with an ISFP. Also, great pleasure of typing her, of course. I don't mean to diss her or that session just because it's not, rare. But in fact, that was great too. The way that I was able to. But this is what I like about both those types is when they're not in it seems like, except for Sheila, I can't really think of an instance. I haven't typed many ISFJs though, but I can't really think of an instance where an ISFJ didn't want to be an ISFJ and insisted they were something else. Sheila insisted she was an ISFP. I'm quite confident she was an ISFJ. I still maintain my position, but she never came. We never saw eye to eye about that. That was one of my clients that, or just I don't know if she paid me to type her or not, but I think who cares? One of my clients that I couldn't come to an agreement with that I was right about it. The ISFJ and the ISFP this morning both validated on so many points of their respective types. It's super gratifying to see how everything's really falling into place as far as typing people. The ISFP had been typed before, and then she came here. So this happens quite a bit with ISFPs. It seems that they keep getting a typing until they're satisfied. I'm pretty confident that the ISFP this morning will not end up pursuing more information about her type now, which type she is, because I think she'll be satisfied that yes, I got her type right. Same with the ISFJ. The ISFP said she'd been typed before. She'd been typed as ESFP and ISFJ. And so I talked about, well, ESFP is not a terrible mistyping because it's the same quadra, the same function stack basically, except, it's the extroverted version. And in fact, with certain extrovert-introvert pairs, it can be quite easy to mistake the two. The possibility of mistyping an ISFJ or an INFJ for somebody who's not very comfortable with typing people is it's likely to lead you to mistype as an extrovert. I no longer, I think, am nearly as susceptible to mistyping as extroverts, but still, the FE tool function types, they're susceptible to that because their initial engagement with you using their tool function involves so much of the function that associates strongest with the colloquial understanding of the word extroverted. Whereas extroverted sensing really doesn't. So in the ISFP, where it doesn't set the frame as an action frame, but rather it's a tool function, and the NE polar that corresponds with it, they are not talkative at all. The ISFPs are quite talkative. So they're very distinct. it's much more likely you're gonna mistake an INTP for an ENTP or an ISFJ for an ESFJ. Less likely you're going to mistake an INTJ for an ENTJ, but least likely you're going to mistake an ISFP for an ESFP. But that mistyping was still a reasonable mistyping because the person may have been doing their best to even perhaps work on look at the skills or something, and you got your shoes.
Yeah.
and sort of misread the data there. But regardless, the ISFJ typing of her, I was just like, whoever typed you as an ISFJ knows nothing about cognitive functions. She said, oh, I remember his name, C.S. Joseph. I was like, of course. Anyway, so what's something an ISFP is? What's something that the ISFP identified with strongly when I related it to her? It was this idea that the idea of a demonstrative but countervalued 6-slot function. So her relationship with her SI was very much like she will provide past examples, reference past examples to offer justifications to people, more so than she's likely to offer TI justifications. But it's for their sake, never for hers, and left to her, she's not fond of reminiscing or calling up past examples or past data, but she just understands that it's required by the world for her to be communicatively effective. It's totally instrumental, and when she's not required by the world, she's no interest in it. So she identified strongly with that, which was nice to hear. And the other thing is the ISFJ was about as textbook as you could get. So, I asked her about TV tastes. I said, "Are you a PBS watcher?" And she said, "Well, yes. I mean, if I'm watching TV, yeah, decent chance I might be watching. I love that Sherlock Holmes. I love that. It was fantastically ISFJ." And I asked her about how she talked about how she liked to cook a lot, and I said, "Well, when you're cooking, do you try to manage your use of dishes so that you have less to clean up at the end? So, for example, are you careful about how many bowls and plates and utensils you use?" You go, "Oh, no. When I'm done, my kitchen looks like a bomb enough. I just figure I'll just deal with the mess afterwards." I'm like, "Hello, ISFJ." When I actually asked her the question as well, if your freezer is too warm, it's not working. Your freezer's too warm. If you're going to fix it, do you need to know what temperature the freezer is supposed to be at? She said, yes. Wait. Of course, the answer is no. If you know your freezer's too warm, you don't need to know what temperature it's supposed to be at to fix the problem. You just need to make it colder. This was the most striking example of TE polar I've ever experienced in my life. Was Kimberly telling me 3 times that the freezer was too warm, and when I went over there, and you don't even have to open the freezer door to turn down the temperature. It has little arrows on the front. And when I finally went in and said, "Okay, let me look at this thing. What's the problem exactly?" She said, "The freezer's too warm." I'm like, "Well, did you try pushing the down arrow to turn down the temperature?" She's like, "I didn't know what temperature it was supposed to be at. It needs to be colder, Kimberly." That's what it needs to be. Okay? The reason the freezer is not right now is because the ice cream is melty. And I understand that that's a problem. You're telling me, and this is what you told me, that she had tried to Google it, what temperature is this brand of freezer supposed to be at? Couldn't find the answer. And so threw her hands up in despair. That's some TE polar right there. And you know what it means? It means you've got the statuses as an absolute value. You think everything relies on statuses. Like well, of course you'll need to know what this or that status is in order to address this thing. It's expressly weird in the ISFJ because they've got this particularist knowledge function, but then this weirdly inappropriate universalist TE polar approach to particularist problems. So when I was asking her about her TE, she's basically telling me, like, no, I have a really good sense of where to put something in. But she didn't. It's like, it was the TE polar was just like, no, that's not TE. But it sort of is, but it's so much, it's like pure SI, really. So it's like, yes, the ISFJ will, they first of all, they like to rearrange their room, their space, like every 3 weeks or something. Just like, now I think I was wrong. This is kind of in the way. We need to move the couch over there this time. Didn't I just fucking move this thing? Well, but it's like, I just don't, my clients come in here and they bump into this and okay, all right, I'll move the fucking couch. It's like, that's, when I described to the ISFJ the likely interaction between her and her ENTP husband, I said, your husband probably says, that's not the way the world works. And you probably go, David, just no. She basically said, yep, that's exactly how we interact. It's because people don't like being pushed on their 8th slot function. And ENTPs use NI all the time. But here is the NI. You have compelled me to activate my 5th slot function. I was sitting here trying to joke around about nonsense, and then you went and said something false, and now I'm going to have to meow you. Well, that's their 8th slot function. So it's like, anytime somebody pushes on your 8th slot, you're just like, no. For me, that's like, don't bust my chops about not following through on shit. Don't bust my chops about how I just need to do this or do, it's like, or don't bust my chops on, why don't you just finish it right now, Eric, so that you get it out of the way. It's a good idea. I agree with you, but I don't want you to tell me that. So basically, I was doing that to Kimberly all the time. It's one of the things that makes an ISFJ ENTP relationship difficult. And I could tell that their relationship was good, happy, loving, and also difficult. They had those kind of exchanges where, but the ENTP's going, but the ISFJ just going, no, I will not listen. It's just textbook. I just thought, you know what? I'm happy to be out of my quadra. She's great. I like this lady. I feel immediately like comfortable and like mom. She is her daughter is 10 years older than my daughter. So make of that what you will. But she reminded me a lot of my mom too. Not just in some ways she reminded me more of my mom than Kimberly because she didn't have. This lady didn't emerge from trauma, and hadn't experienced a lot of trauma in her life. I don't think she had she was a housewife. She had kids. She had grandkid now, and it seems like she had a loving childhood. Textbook ISFJ. When I asked her questions about this thing, she'd somehow managed to link it back to this time in 3rd grade when she and when I tried to ask her about NISI, it was a really interesting response. I said, what do you think NI is? She said, well, I think, let's say I'm driving down the street and I see that somebody's Venetian blinds are all tore up in their window. And I noticed that they have a dog in there, and then the dog tears them up. Well, I'm going to make note of that. I'm going to say, aha! I have a dog, so I'm not going to get those kind of blinds. That was, and I thought, you know what? In some sense, that is NI. You're right. You're taking a universal and applying it to the particular. So the directionality is right, but it's definitely SI because it's like you are actually taking, it's sort of a universal, that dogs can destroy Venetian blinds, but you're really just first taking a personal experience, unreasonably generalizing from it into a universal, and then applying it back to the particular again. And then it prompted me to think, well, what would be the NI version of that? An NI version of that would be like, I guess you'd say, you'd sort of have this NI understanding of a archetypal family with a dog that looks like it fits into that house, maybe. So if the house is like really well kept, except for that Venetian blinds, an NI person would probably get this vision of a family that's like sort of FETE on point, and is frustrated by a dog that is not in line with the rest of their family values.
Totally.
I think an NI response to that would be that. Whereas the SI response is, oh, dogs destroy Venetian blinds. I have a dog. Avoid the problems by learning from somebody else's mistake and not get Venetian blinds. That's such a workaround for TE polar. It's like TE polar and ISFJ gets worked around by looking for an experience within their experiential frame, visible mistakes, including their own, I guess, or bad things that happen, and then preventing them from happening again. And sometimes they can go a little overboard and go. It's like it's the Bear Patrol in The Simpsons, where somebody spots a bear in Springfield, and all of a sudden everybody's marching on City Hall to demand that the mayor institute a bear patrol to protect everyone from bears. That's the sort of excessive extrapolation from experience that ISFJs are prone to. The ISFP was so different from the ISFJ, and of course, as always, the ISFP session ran short. It's like she was ready to end in like 30 minutes. I try to press it to 40 just because I just don't want them to feel shortchanged. They're paying for an hour, but they're full. They've eaten all they want to eat at like 40 minutes. That's just so consistent with the ISFPs. It's crazy. So it's like, even if you were to disagree with my typing of somebody, increasingly you'll have to disagree with. You have to say, like, okay, Eric's right that all of these people express their response to the personality questions he's providing in the same way. They do all share the traits that he's saying, and he can show it in the demonstrative, and he can demonstrate it in the data by just, like, I could in theory put a bunch of clips of ISFPs all demonstrating the same behavior, one right after another, and say, and then another one show how they all correlate in the same way, and explain why, and say, this is my explanation. So if you're going to say, well, they're not an ISFP, then you better have, you're going to have to still acknowledge they are all the same type, and I've just got everything mixed up backwards and with all other which ways. But then you're going to have a better explanation, which they certainly don't. So, it's pretty invigorating, really, when shit starts to fall into place where I get so I can know what to ask and interpret correctly. There's a lot of answers where people who critique my typing sessions, they publish, and neither of these people want to publish, so they're not going to be published, which is kind of why I'm talking about them right now. They typically want to critique me by saying, her answers here, or their answers there on this, sound pretty TE to me. Well, yeah, self-reporting answers are terrible, or they're a terrible source of data. So you've got to either be paying attention to how they're self-reporting, So in other words, if they self-report, yes, I'm a very creative person. Like this one time I went to Judy's and we did this kind of creative activity and she said meow and I said meow, meow, meow. Well, then you're seeing SI in that. They're answering, yes, I'm very creative, but don't pay attention to that part. Pay attention to how their cognition is going. You know, a function is an operation executed upon objects or agents or variables or something like that, right? And so, of course, it's also important to remember that people are very susceptible to the fish out of water syndrome, the jumping fish syndrome, which is you're a fish and you are a really good jumping fish. You're way more comfortable jumping through the air than most of your fish friends, and blah 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 blah. But the thing is, when I'm asking you a question about how comfortable you are in the air, and you're saying very comfortable, if I'm doing it wrong, I'm going to go, yep, that's a bird. Because I'm not understanding that self-reporting answers are wrong. Because, see, this fish, it thinks of itself in terms of its maximal distinction from others of its equivalents. And it doesn't think of itself in terms of its distinction from others who are very different from them when asked to establish its level of meow against nothing, which is what most self-reporting does. So in other words, it's not saying who's more creative, you or your best friend. It's saying how creative are you, or are you creative, or do you identify as very creative, medium creative, or uncreative and dumb? Like, people don't want to put uncreative and dumb. They don't want, are you in the gold group, the silver group, or the brown group? Nobody wants to be in the brown group. So it doesn't matter what the function is, right? It's like, well, are you really good at learning from your past mistakes? Yeah, I'm really good at that. You know, a lot of people will say that, even if what they really mean is that that instances have been highly impactful have been instances where they have learned from their past mistakes. So they stand out and they remember more, but in general they actually don't, and they repeat mistakes multiple times before they do remember. It could be a consequence of their bad SI rather than an indication that, they've got good SI working. Or it could just be something that's just inconsistent with the reality. Like, I think I'm very good at learning from my past mistakes. I'm an ENTP. But I think that it only appears as though an ENTP is good at learning from their past mistakes after they've made the mistake of not learning from their past mistakes a few times. So the older you get, the more it seems as though your SI is effective in guiding your path, especially if you're an ENTP without any FI. But have I become better at it? Have I become, like, did I improve at it? Did I practice it or try to get better at it or something? No. And in terms of its practical day-to-day ins and outs, I'm just as bad as I've ever been. How often do I say to Rachel, what was that thing, what was the example we were using when we were talking about this NI concept? And neither of us can remember the example. This happens all the time. We both remember the conversation. So you remember when I was saying, like, I said meow, and she go, yeah, and then I said meow, 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 and you said meow. And I'm like, yeah, that conversation. So what was the thing we were talking about? And neither of us can remember. It's totally, it shows how ENTPs can be heavily NI in their manifestation of SI. So basically that the kind of things I keep track of include a lot more NI relevant factors than SI relevant factors. In fact, in terms of debate and stuff, I always go as frame level as I can, is my natural instincts, rather than as specific level. I think that arguing at the case level is kind of weak. Like, I don't need your specific examples. Let's argue this as a matter of principle. Anyhow, that's just me, and great time this morning typing ISFJ lady, ISFP lady. I'm confident that ISFJ lady was totally like, yes, that's what I am. ISFP lady, of course, after 40 minutes has to go and feel about it for a while. So, but I think she'll end up saying like, okay, yeah, I get this now. You got me right. ISFPs don't stop getting typed until somebody gets it right. And ESFP, she's like, I knew I wasn't an extrovert. I'm like, no, you're not an extrovert. You got polar NE, you don't have polar TI. And what else was I gonna say? I guess that's about it. Anyway, so yeah, what I liked about both the typings and whenever this happens is what I least like is the instance when I get a sensor who thinks they're an intuitive. When that doesn't happen, then I love typing sessions. They're always fun. I don't like the event when I have to explain to an ESFP, for example, that they're not an INFJ. That's always a challenge. But it really hasn't happened much lately that I've had any pushback on from any clients. Maybe I'm getting better at it or something like that. I do certainly feel like it's really starting to click. Bee! Watch out for bees today, everybody. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to eat plenty of bees.